Manjika, welcome. It's Kabina Crawford here from RMIT, and we are meeting the wonderful Eleanor Colbeck. Thank you so much for your time. But before we start, I'm going to do an acknowledgement of country. So I am in Naarm here on Wurundjeri country. I would like to pay my respects to Wurundjeri elders, past and present, of the Boonwurrung and Woiwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations. Um, and I'd like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and that it always was and always will be Wurundjeri land. But I believe you're in Dja Dja Wurrung country today, Eleanor.
I am. I'm out in Trentham, Dja Dja Wurrung country. Beautiful, beautiful time of year. It's cold, it's wet, but all the mushrooms are out in bloom and there's lots of colour everywhere, despite none of the trees having leaves at the moment. So great.
We love it. Yeah, it's wonderful at that time of the year, but chilly, but good. So you've joined us here today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So yeah, my name's Eleanor. I use they or she pronouns. I am trans feminine, trans woman. Gender is pretty abstract and a bit of a construct once you get too deep into the weeds. I am 33. I originally grew up in Tassie, in Latroida, and my path has taken me from intergenerational poverty through to studying a Bachelor of Engineering in Canberra, working for a non-profit designing assistive technology, moving to Naarm, and I did my Masters of Aerospace Engineering there. Had a bit of a lived experience moment in 2020 when COVID hit, like most of us did, I suppose. Sort of uncovered a whole heap of childhood trauma, uncovered a whole heap of latent gender stuff, and decided that, sending billionaires to space wasn't really what I was going for with my life. So I'm currently a mental health peer worker working for Thorn Harbour Country. I'm working out of the Mental Health and Wellbeing Locals, which is sort of designed to address the missing middle of mental health care. People who aren't severe enough to go into area mental health services, but need a little bit more support than your average GP. I am specifically an LGBTQIA plus lived experience mental health peer worker. So I specifically work with the priority population of LGBTQIA plus people.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I love that you are a rocket scientist. So whenever I think about saying it's not rocket science, I think of you. Amazing mad skills. So this recording is for certificate for mental health PWorks, mental health students. So I'll ask you a few questions that are relevant to working with maybe trans LGBTIQ consumers in a mental health context and how to do that appropriately. We can talk about that. But before we get started, let's go straight into the weeds. And people often get sex and gender confused. Like, can you explain the difference between the two?
Sure. Right into the weeds. So sex, we usually
Yeah.
think of male or female. You're generally given one of those at birth. Some people are not easily distinguished as male or female at birth. They would be intersex people, and that can be anything from different genital configuration to secondary sex characteristics. Someone may have what is considered male genitalia, but then also have a uterus or vice versa. Sex is not as binary as we're sort of taught growing up, but sex is really defined by like the physical characteristics of who you are. Very complicated. Gender, on the other hand, is how you identify yourself and how you sort of move through the world. So for me, I was assigned male at birth, so my sex is male. When I go to the doctor, get a new GP, they have to ask me the sex I was assigned at birth. I say male. When I'm moving about the world, though, I present feminine. I am on hormone replacement therapy. I've had different surgeries, and that really I present to the world as what is approximately a woman. Gender is even more confusing than sex because obviously you've got man and woman is what we usually taught growing up, but then there's people that just don't feel like they fit in any of those categories. You've got non-binary identities. You've got sometimes people can be fluid throughout their life or throughout a week and how they feel about themselves. Yeah, there's a really good resource called The Gingerbread Person, which goes into sex, gender, and sexuality as 3 different components of, an LGBTQIA plus person's identity. Definitely worth having a look at. And I think the other thing that I do want to sort of say is that gender is not tied to sexuality. So I consider myself a gender fluid person. I'm mostly attracted to women, sometimes attracted to men. So I consider myself bisexual. Non-binary people, it's just, if you're cool, you're cool. So it's yeah, everyone has a different take on that as well. So I would not be, don't want to act like I'm the authority on that, but that's a little glimpse into what different people can sort of feel about themselves. And yeah, everyone's different though.
Amazing. So it's like a choose your own adventure.
It really is. It really is. And I think a lot of the joy of being a non-binary person or a trans person or a queer person, or I don't know, I feel like a lot of marginalized groups have this in common where you don't accept the rules that society gives you and you get to just play around in this magical sandbox of earth. And it's a really, really beautiful thing to do that work in discovering yourself, discovering who you truly are and want to be. And yeah, since uncovering my gender in like 2020, I've lived an entire lifetime in the last 6 years. It's a really
amazing
process. Yeah.
Amazing. And so I was going to ask for someone who has never met a trans person before, like what is the appropriate way to introduce yourself and engage with people? Like, are there any definitely do's and definitely don'ts?
Not really. Definitely do treat them as just another person because I don't know, this might be controversial, but if you're in a situation where you wouldn't normally introduce yourself with pronouns, it's going to feel really weird to someone if you do that there. If you're in a workplace setting, it's usually a really good idea to use pronouns, or an education setting. You can be like, hey, my name's Eleanor, I use they or she pronouns. And that's pretty normal in a formal environment. If you're, just meeting someone off the street that you suspect might be trans, introducing yourself with pronouns might feel a bit weird. Again, it's one of those things. Everyone's so different. Definitely don't question. Sorry, it's scattered at the moment. If someone introduces themselves, they might choose to offer their pronouns. Definitely use those. So, if I introduce myself as they, she, and you start calling me he, that's going to immediately shut down the conversation. If I tell you my name is Eleanor and you suspect I might have had another name at a different point, don't ask me about that name because it's not part of who I am. For some people, it is, like they are very open about their previous gender/life, but for other people, it's something that they really try to leave behind. So we call that a dead name, by the way. Yeah, I don't know. Does that sort of answer the question?
Absolutely. And one thing that I do try and stress in classes and in role plays and so forth, when you're meeting a client for the first time, doesn't matter how they present, you should always introduce yourself with your pronouns and ask for people's preferred pronouns, no matter what they look like, because it's about creating an environment where people are welcome and feel comfortable expressing their gender identity. And it's about creating a community that accepts people's preferred genders without question, which is really important because in the trans community, there's so much stigma and discrimination, which leads to mental health concerns. Like, do you like, there is some data out there about trans communities, trans people, and how mental health is impacted by discrimination. Do you know any of those, that evidence offhand?
Not offhand. Thank you for tethering me back to the mental health context. But yes, when you're meeting a client, absolutely introduce your name and pronouns and offer them the opportunity to offer theirs. It's something like, oh goodness, I don't know the exact figures, but it's something like 40% of trans people have attempted suicide in their lives. And it's just tragic. They do find that the mental health outcomes of trans people who are accepted by their family improve drastically. So it cuts down mental distress by approximately half. And there are a lot of trans people will avoid seeking support because of stigma, and because they don't know if their identity is going to be respected. So that obviously contributes really, really drastically to for mental health as well, because you just feel like you've got nowhere to go and you're isolated in the world.
So that's why in a mental health context, you're doing incredibly important work if you treat people with respect and dignity and treat people as equals. As we know, transphobia is a human rights abuse. Like trans people have it's my understanding is that gender identity is protected under human rights legislation, and discriminating against trans people is actually illegal. So inclusive practice, if we are going to work ethically in the mental health sector, making sure that we treat clients and consumers in a respectful way is absolutely of paramount importance. Like, what would that look like in practice, do you think?
Well, yeah, firstly, you're absolutely right. It is a human rights issue, and I think luckily Victoria is probably one of the best places in the world for maintaining and upholding those rights at the moment. Long way to go still, but yeah, I feel like there is a real solid expectation in workplaces and in mental health services that you do respect people's gender identities along with all their other protected characteristics. Inclusive practice in the workplace, there's the basics, there's the introducing yourself with your pronouns, there's the asking every person's pronouns, not just the people you think might be trans. It's also, there's this idea of trans broken arm syndrome, where someone who's trans might be going to a doctor for support, and then, maybe they've broken their arm. And instead of getting a splint and x-rays, they get quizzed about their gender identity and what sex they were assigned at birth and what's in their pants at the moment. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that a trans person is a person first and foremost. For a lot of us, especially as we move on in our journey, our transness is a small part of who we are. And it's really important to look at the bigger picture, especially if you're in a mainstream service and you are working with a trans person. Don't make the sessions all about their trans identity, because what they're going through in that journey is deeply personal. It's usually like entirely necessary for them to be on that journey for their mental health, and questioning it or interrogating it, digging into it isn't going to be helpful. See them for who they are completely. If they offer experiences around their gender, absolutely feel free to engage with that with curiosity. It's almost never appropriate to ask what's in someone's pants. I would struggle to think of a time that's ever been relevant. But yeah, if it is something that does need to be explored because they're talking about it or they're having trouble accessing healthcare or something, there's something related to their gender identity that needs exploration. Treat it with curiosity and kindness and honesty. And if you, it's the principles of IPS, which I suppose you won't be doing in the mental health third, but try to understand their worldview. Try to understand what's important to them about their identity. And what can you do to support that would be the biggest advice I can give, I suppose.
Amazing. And I think that sometimes it gets lost that in all the noise around trans politics and issues, it gets lost that the medical profession absolutely accepts it's gender dysphoria, isn't it? So people are born in a body that doesn't match their gender. It's medically accepted, and yeah, it's not like a fashion statement or something that's done lightly. Like people are actually genuinely born knowing that they are a different gender. Is that a way of best way of characterizing it?
To be honest, it's a touch outdated. Gender dysphoria is absolutely a real diagnosis. I guess the way the conversation's heading now is that dysphoria is not necessarily a part of being trans. It can be, absolutely, but it can be that instead of feeling pain in your old gender, maybe you feel more joy in a new gender. And it's a strengths-based approach to gender, I suppose. It's like I was content enough with manhood as it was, but as soon as I began exploring, I was so much happier being a feminine person. So yeah, there is a conversation around that, but it is also medically accepted that gender dysphoria exists. There are OzPath is the organisation in Australia that sets the sort of healthcare guidelines, standards of care for GPs and so on. Can you remind me the rest of that question? Because there was something else I had to add.
Medical profession accepting what I thought gender dysphoria was like a fairly inarguable position, like in terms of medical science.
Yes, yeah, that's very much the case. Yeah. If I think of it, I'll bring it up again.
No worries. I really appreciate this and the opportunity to ask questions that people might feel like too shy to ask. As you know, 26 years ago, I identified as a trans exclusionary radical feminist, otherwise known as TERFs. We have famous TERFs in the world like J.K. Rowling and people who are really hostile to the idea that trans people belong in, trans people, she feels that trans people don't belong in so-called women's only spaces, like women's bathrooms, women's groups. Like, what would you say to someone who held those opinions?
It's my knee-jerk reaction is to say that they have no idea what they're talking about. I think there is a nuanced conversation to be had about some aspects of those talking points, but I think in general, putting it as publicly and as loudly as someone like J.K. Rowling is. It's not. It's just stirring up hatred. So what they're finding in the UK now is that, firstly, trans women are more likely to be assaulted in a bathroom than a cis woman just by being who they are.
Mhm.
So with their now bathroom bans, they've introduced legislation that means you must use the bathroom you were assigned at birth, of the sex you were assigned at birth. So the fear of predators is now compounded because you can have a cis man enter a woman's bathroom saying that they're a trans man, and that's the room that they have to be in. And trans men, if you've never met a trans man, well, you probably have, but you wouldn't know because a lot of the time they've got the big bushy beard, they've got the muscles and the tattoos, and like you don't. No one really thinks about that aspect of things. I think people like J.K. Rowling aren't scared of trans women; they're scared of men, and so they're scared of someone who used to be a man but is now a woman and actually subject to a lot of the same beauty standards and societal pressures and misogyny and risks of violence. They're all compounded for trans people. So when we go into a woman's bathroom, we are more scared of everyone in there than they should be of us by a long shot. Yeah.
Yeah. You said a term that people might not be familiar with, cisgender. Could you explain what that is?
Sure. So cisgender is when you identify with the gender that usually matches the sex you were assigned at birth. So I presume you are cisgender. Is that right?
Yep.
Yep. So you were born woman, living as a woman, happy with that. Yeah. It's literally just the opposite of transgender. It's not anything more than that. Some of the TERFs like to say it's a slur because they just want to be, they'd rather the term normal, but it's really about sort of equalizing that they are both valid human experiences to be either cis or trans.
So I want to touch on the fact that there's parts of the world where being trans is incredibly dangerous, increasingly so in America, where people's identity documents are being revoked so they can't travel, all kinds of discrimination. Why do you think that politically trans people are victimized the way they are in mainstream discourse now?
That is such a tricky, tricky question. We've seen it for decades, probably for forever, honestly. We saw the gay panic in the 70s, 80s, 90s. We see it with immigration. I think there are some people in the world that are advantaged by the discourse around trans people. And I think if you want to put the tinfoil hat on, I think a lot of the time it's to distract from other horrible political things that are happening. It's Pauline Hanson, for example, is drumming up all this hatred about immigration and about trans people, and it's just for the sake of whipping up a frenzy and getting votes. And so I don't have a good answer, honestly, because beyond that, I don't see anything that's changed. I think I've seen a rise in acceptance, like we've become more visible as a community. I think anytime change happens in the world, people push against it. There'll always be someone that does that. I'm hopeful that this is sort of the last little temper tantrum of some of those people before, trans people who have existed for eternity are finally accepted in the Western world. Yeah.
Amazing. And yeah, it is. And I don't think, there's no clear-cut answer to that, but I do think that there are some people who get a lot of political capital out of punching on minorities, including trans people. But I suppose as a cis person, I want to be an ally. An ally is someone who supports the defending the human rights and protecting the human rights of trans people and queer people. What can I do to make the trans community less likely to experience mental health trauma and discrimination?
I think as mental health professionals, that is a really powerful position to be in. By the time a trans person builds up the courage to approach a service, their fear of rejection, of misidentification, the fear of having to present legal documents that may not align with who they are. The moment a trans person reaches out for help can be a really, really scary time. I think being sure to be that person that follows, even if you get 100 cis people that say, why are you asking me my pronouns? Can't you tell? All that sort of garbage. For the one trans person who gets the opportunity to say, oh, I use she, her. And okay, what name do you prefer if it's different to your Medicare ID? Oh, I prefer this name. That person has suddenly discovered a faith in you as a human being and is going to engage with that service. And that's huge. Just maintaining those professional standards around asking pronouns and names and lowering the barrier to entry as much as possible, just with kindness. That's one of the most powerful things I think someone in a mental health service can do.
Amazing, thank you. And we are about to wrap up, so I'm wondering if there's any advice or wisdom that you would like to leave our Certificate for Mental Health students with before we go.
In my experience, being trans means questioning most of your life. By the time you arrive at the conclusion that you are trans, you've interrogated it months, possibly years, possibly decades. And along with that, you've done a lot of looking inward, and you can be very sort of perceptive to your own values and your own needs. You might not understand why a trans person is trans. It may be something that you can never fully relate to, but just understand that it is very real. It's the result of an extensive and very stressful process for someone to affirm their gender. And if they're coming to you for support, consider it a privilege, because it's a very interesting perspective to have on the world, being on different sides of the gender fence. You can learn a lot from that about privilege, intersectionality. Yeah, just listen.
Amazing advice. Thank you so much. I'm about to stop recording now, but before I go, I'd like to thank you so much for your time. I've learned so much, and I'm sure our students really appreciate your time as well.
No problem.
Thank you.